Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds Edge to Edge Transformation. And speaking of transformation, you need catalysts. Andy Thurai is one of those amazing catalysts. Not only has he been an analyst, he writes really well. That's how I got to know him through his LinkedIn posts. And he's been advising companies, doing all kinds of things. Andy, tell us a little bit about you. How did you end up doing all kinds of things like this?
Uh, that's a good question. So, I don't really know. Long ago I realized that, maybe I can't be so deep immersed myself in one area because, if you are so deep immersed in one, there is somebody always who can come out and beat you. And I forget who it is who said, is it Michael Jordan who said, I'm not worried about the guys who are already out in the field. When I'm taking 100 or 200 practice shots, I'm worried about somebody who's going to take 500 practice shots and come out and beat me. So I've tried to develop a multiverse skill. So if in case I lose job or focus or opportunity in one area, that I could depend on others. But then it kind of evolved over years, I guess, to become sort of like a jack of all trades, I would say. So I'm a jack of all trades, if that's what you mean.
Which trade did you begin with? I mean, you have such vast knowledge and you give commentaries on various aspects of artificial intelligence, connectivity, 5G. And I always read what you write because it makes sense. So I
Thank
may
you.
not agree with it, but it still makes sense. So
I
how did
appreciate
you
that. Thank
start?
you. Well, as with most of us Indians, I have a background in engineering degree. Matter of fact, I did my studies in electrical and electronics. And over the course of years, somehow I developed interest in computer software. I did my higher studies on that as well. And then, computer architecture, software architecture, and then, was a field CTO helping companies, architect solutions, some of the major companies, customers. And then kind of the field of software architecture fascinates me because it's you got to be on your toes. It's ever changing, and things are on those days I thought things were changing so fast, and now we are in 10 times of that now. So it's a fascinating field. So I developed interest into it. So Korea progressed from electrical electronics into software engineering and then into speaking about it rather than doing with it.
I remember the days when we had to really work on breadboards and PCBs and all that. And now pretty much everything in hardware is done with software, with high level CAD algorithms. But the other way around also seems to be happening, isn't it? Software driven hardware, software that directs hardware. What do you think about that? How real is software driven hardware today?
So the thing is, particularly, when you need flexibility and configuration, your hardware can never match what your software can provide. I mean, I used to program in my first job. I remember I used to program the PLC chips, the EPROMs, if you remember, way back when. You got to
Programmable
burn
logic.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to burn them, the code logic into that and to make it work. And if you make a mistake, I remember the movie. There was a pirate movie. It's an old movie. I saw that many, many, many years ago, and it was set in the setting of 1600s or something that they were shooting. And in that, they were saying, which kind of resonated with me, this guy will be trying to shoot somebody who's running, charging with a sword. And then, they use the gunpowder guns those days. He will, put all the gunpowder, you'll solidify that and you'll fire it up, and then you'll fire at the guy, he'll miss it. And then he'll like, oh crap. And then he will start doing it again. But the time before it took, the guy will come and slash him, right? So if you have to do a network thing like that, if you have to burn every time, it's going to take a ton of time. So having more of a, software things, you can reprogram or replatform things fairly quickly. So that's why software has become more famous. But then again, once you solidify what it does, if it can be standardized, if you're doing that same workflow, same logic, same things, it'll be faster, obviously served with a chip or a networking or a hardware simply because it's reduced instruction set, right? You could do a RISC processor which does way better. So software, obviously, you got to go through compilation and the whole nine yards, a big thick one that you have to run through. So software is flexible, good to work on all the time. But if you need volume game, it got to be hardware based. So that's where even the AI world is going there. I mean, we talked about it just before this. There are companies that are trying to build AI and ML systems on a chip and
Mhm.
trying to build that. And obviously, NVIDIA is so popular, but there are other companies who do similar to what NVIDIA does, even other things that much better than that. But again, unfortunately, most of them don't have a storyteller like Jensen Huang, so they're not that popular. But hopefully, I hope they'll be successful.
In fact, I mean, everybody is looking for competition because nobody wants a monopoly. And Jensen Wong is like the Western cowboy of NVIDIA. They're going places. But the criticism I always hear is that the nascent chip companies, whether it's Intel, Gaudi 2, or many startups, they don't yet have the entire software stack. They're not fully validated. As an analyst, or if you wear your analyst hat, where do you see that? Is this going to get disrupted very soon? Will you see serious competition in the near future? Or
Yes and no. So if you think about it, NVIDIA is not purely born and bred to do just AI, right? I mean, they started up as a graphics chip company, and they are building things for mainly graphics board accelerations and whatnot for PCs and laptops and whatnot, the GPU accelerators and GPU chips for the graphics purposes, since it's named as that graphical processor unit, right? And then over the years, he has figured out a way to pivot that into a bigger market sizes, bigger TAMs. From there, he went to what he had dibs at crypto and then the metaverse and Web3 and whatnot. And then once he unearthed AI, you're like, oh my God, this is nobody is thinking about this. We got to create this whole industry. So again, it's not just being a storyteller, but about a trailblazer of knowing what you're good at and what you can do better than others. And I'm sure the AI wave will die down like others did before that, whether it's a blockchain or something else. And he'll figure out a way to come up with something else. Whatever that something else, they're going to be very, very, very successful in that, right? For that's for NVIDIA's case. But for can anyone else do AI as good as NVIDIA? There are competition, that I'm seeing that are slowly popping up. Sam Bonova Systems is doing extremely good work, both from chip level all the way up to the systems. Obviously, Google is building their own chip, the TPUs, and others to challenge that. Amazon has been building their own chips in that for a while too. Are any of them going to be as successful as NVIDIA? Probably not. But would they give a worthy competition to take at least some market share away rather than 100% being with NVIDIA? Absolutely. Soon enough. Matter of fact, I don't know if they did the release yet or not. Sam Bonova Systems briefed me, I believe it was last week, about their new upcoming release that they're coming up with. Absolutely outstanding numbers. And I even posted on LinkedIn. I think you liked that as well.
yeah,
I'm like, oh
yeah.
my God, let me talk. And they're like, no, you're under kibosh. You can't talk about it. I'm like, yeah, well, then why are you briefing me? So good stuff. I'm seeing not only the big companies there, right? There are smaller companies. We talked about such companies just, before the call. There are chip companies that are trying to do a whole AI ML systems in a chip or edge systems on a chip. Because as we talked about, the when it has become a cookie cutter operation, chips can provide a much higher performance ratio because the data movement becomes minimized. So I definitely will see in the next 5 to 10 years there are going to be many more startups than what already is, and probably some of them are going to be successful. You couldn't figure out who, but I'm sure some of them will be.
True. And you brought up a very interesting point. There is this big hype cycle, right?
Mm.
Blockchain has gone through it, crypto has gone through it. Right now, we still seem to be ascending on the hype cycle for AI, generative AI.
Mm.
But eventually, something real comes out of it. What do you see coming real out of blockchain? Are there use cases today? And will blockchain be a solid part of the whole software value chain for customers going forward?
You specifically want to talk about just blockchain?
Yeah,
Okay.
or how does that combine with other things? Because
Yeah. So
think about it this way. We are in the industry. We've been in it for 20, 30 years, and still it's confusing. Can you imagine what it must be like for end users?
well, the end users don't have that much problem because they seem to take it at the face value of most times. For example, to give you an idea, I take a long Uber ride from home to the airport, and every time when I go, I strike up a conversation, and then we start chatting, and then my Uber Lyft drivers, they ask what you do, and simplest way to explain would be that I'm an advisor consultant in AI space, and then they start telling me how they use Chat GPT for their use cases. So there are
Uh-huh.
some of the use cases are pretty good actually. Essentially, in my view, any emerging technology for that matter was invented to make us lazy, to make us an easy path. Let have the robots and AI, something else do our job while I sit and relax and do less work, but more brainy and complicated work. But let the monotonous work being outsourced. That's the whole goal from the day one of robotics and automation and AI and a lot of those things, right? So
Yes.
coming back to your question about blockchain, there are some solid use cases that I see for blockchain, right? Even though, unfortunately, when the blockchain came out, crypto took a angle off its own, which became quite popular and died down fairly soon, and a lot of people manipulated. But leaving that aside, the blockchain technology itself is more of a distributed ledger concept. When people try to force fit that into be a real database, which it's not, or doing things that it's not, that's where the problem began. But there are things that it allows you to do a distributed ledger and provenance validation and immutable, right? And non-reversible. Those are things are characteristics. Can that be built using other mechanisms, combination of software and database and whatnot? Yeah, absolutely. But again, this could be a good use case to solve those, problems. And I've seen a lot of customers use it for that too. The problem actually starts to come when they start to force fit that into a place where it doesn't fit and belong, and then where the problem is. For example, I'll give you an idea. I forget the name of the company that when I was with IBM at that time, blockchain was pretty popular too. So as an emerging tech team, innovation team, that's one of the projects we were helping out the company execute. That in the diamond industry, finding out the lineage of the diamond and or whether it's a blood diamond is a pretty big thing, and you need a way to prove that mechanism. So one of the
Yeah.
company that we worked with, what they used to do is that from the time you unearth the raw diamond, you will take a pictures and then immute that and put it in the ledger through the process of it. So from start to end, there is a way for you to validate where it came from, where all the process it went through, and do I want to buy that. And that's useful in doing that simply because of a couple of reasons. Because the diamond has a lot of dirtiness associated with them and how people do that and the whole nine yards, where it came from and what people do to it. And two, most importantly, that you want to know the lineage of it, especially if you are to pay such a high price to it. I mean, if I'm buying something from Walmart for $20, who cares who makes it? Yeah, I mean, you want to know whether it's done in an ethical way, what have you, but you don't pay much of it. But if you're paying tens of thousands of dollars, then you obviously want to know the things you want to know, whether it's an ethical thing or lineage thing or where it came from or who owned it, whatever. You might want to know that. And blockchain is a perfect way to put that in, right? So there are some enterprise use cases. The other one we worked on is during my IBM days is that we used to write contracts, and Ethereum does that way better than blockchain. So we use Ethereum for those things. You'll write contracts that will be associated with whatever the execution is, and when people want to execute certain things, the contract validation and contract even negotiation can be online. One of the things that I was advising a company at that time, if people want to do certain things, the contracts can be looked up online and negotiated and figured out. So if I want to sell my services, For example, let's say that I'm a data provider being that this is a classic example advice we used to give. Let's say you go to a New York City block, and in a city block, you want to collect information. You want to do a video, you want to do audio, you want to do a whatever information from the city block, weather, temperature, and the whole 9 yards. So if there are 10 or 20 of different companies want to collect that information, you could go there and install by yourself and collect data from all of those things. But it becomes too many data providers messing up the thing. Or there could be a data, producer, and there could be a data aggregator and consolidator, in which case one person will install all the infrastructure that I'll own it, and then I'll put my data on a contract based, such as Ethereum or some other mechanism, that my data will be available, and this is my contract. You can auto execute, negotiate my contract. If you're willing to pay real time, I'll check your contract validation, start feeding you data. That's just one example. What I'm trying to get there is the real-time validation of contracts and from a data provider and an automatic mechanism. That's another great use case. So there are
Yeah.
some good enterprise use cases.
Yeah, I really like the way you put it. Just because you've got a hammer, you don't go finding nails everywhere.
Looking for a
You
nail,
have
yeah.
to be really working on the most appropriate, meaningful use cases. What about the cloud? There was a time when it was believed that everything is going to sit on the cloud. And now we are finding the hybrid clouds and on-prem and all those things. A lot of edgy stuff going on there. What's your prediction on how things will evolve with cloud applications, edge applications, and so on?
So I'll also throw in a quirk that you forgot to mention. In addition to the cloud and on-prem and edge and other things, I'm also seeing a lot of cloud repatriation happening as well.
Yes.
A lot of
Yeah.
companies that has moved to the cloud thinking that they'll get all this dreamland, and then they realize, first of all, some of the SaaS providers and our cloud vendors hold you hostage because you don't have other mechanism, and they jack their prices up unbelievably over the course of time. Some are good at it, some are. There's a big company recently, I don't want to name names, but a CRM company hiked their prices so high that people are looking, what do I do with this? How do I move from here to there? Companies like that. But essentially, if you don't have a backup plan, if you move all into one cloud that is not owned by you, you're basically bound by not only by the pricing terms, but also their contractual terms. What they said becomes most contract. A lot of companies don't even bother reading the contracts, and they're okay, I put the data in there and we'll figure out if something were to happen, right? And then you build your entire ecosystem around it. And if the vendor decides to increase the price or change the contractual terms, you have no say in it because you're locked in, right? So that's an issue that's happening with a lot of cloud and a lot of vendors. Because the cloud is so flexible, they thought, I could save a ton of money. And a lot of CIOs I speak with, they say that, Andy, we thought we were going to save this much of money, but that doesn't seem to be happening. There are situations in which we think we'd be better off if we run these services in-house. So they're starting to move some of the services back into the enterprises. Security is one reason, pricing is another reason, owning your own equipment and able to negotiate to get your own equipment is another reason. There are various reasons why people are moving back. So going forward, I don't think there's going to be a clear-cut answer on where the enterprise is going to exist. The multi-conglomerate big enterprises, they're going to be all over the place. They're going to be hybrid is the term. If you want to use it, that's fine. But again, you're going to be, some solutions running in one cloud, some solutions running in a different cloud because it's better to run that. And then some of them could be SaaS solutions, whether you like it or not. Most of the vendors, companies using it, whether it's Salesforce or Workday or a combination thereof. That also you got to set some policies and stuff like that. So the CIO's roles have become very complicated. I feel for them really because it's one of the very complicated roles, and then the budgets get hit all the time. And if there is an incident, they're the one to blame because almost every company is a digital company now, whether you like it or not, especially after the pandemic.
True, and they started hiring CISOs, right? Not just the CIO, but the Chief Information Security Officer.
Yeah.
So now,
And speaking of, actually, the next report I'm working on, you'll love this. It's Chief AI Officer.
Oh yeah, tell us about
Go to
that.
LinkedIn, go to LinkedIn and Google, see how many Chief AI Officers are there. It's growing on a daily basis,
Yes, yes.
big
So,
time.
so where do you, again, we are still in the midst of this hype cycle,
Oh yeah.
but what are the realistic use cases you've seen for AI that are practical and you think will be long lasting, enduring, will really change the face of companies and technologies?
Let me ask you a clarifying question. What do you mean
Uh,
by AI? Are you talking about generative AI that everybody is getting crazy about now? Or are you talking about a real AI and ML? Because there are
oh,
two different things.
absolutely. And AI has been around for 70 years.
Mm,
To people like me who've been in the industry for a while,
mm,
we started off in good algorithms because there were no neural networks in those days. But with machine learning, in fact, a very interesting announcement came from Intel. Pat Gelsinger mentioned the PCAI, where CPU based edge computers or Gaudi 2 based edge devices for inferencing, and even in some cases, limited amount of training. So I think the picture is getting far more complex. So I'm asking all of the above. What's your prediction on what's happening?
I was afraid you were going to say that. So, well, so like you said, the AI stuff is not new. I actually used to work for IBM Watson, doing some of the strategy for emerging tech and Watson teams and whatnot way back when. People forget IBM used to be the granddaddy of AI a while ago. Their AI systems used to beat the famous chess player Gary Kasparov in the world, and the first time he beat the systems, by the way, and the second time after beating it, he said, "Oh man, I thought it would never catch up to us. Now it's going to be hard to play against the computer." And again, okay, fair enough. It's within specified range of movements, and probably it's calculatable, figure out within bounds. So a lot of people question the AI's validity in that. But then also AI came out and beat the top two Jeopardy players after that. So there are, and off late, I think, what was that game? I forget the name of the game. The famous game, the Japanese guy who used to be pretty
The
popular in
Go game, I think.
the Go game. Yeah,
Yeah,
and then computer landed up beating him too, and he was devastated that he never thought he thought it required so much of subjective thinking and brain
strategy.
power, and computer beat him like that, and AI beat him like that, and he was devastated, saying that, oh my god, and AI can now do anything, kind of thing. So if you look at all that, AI in a certain applications does really well, right? If you specifically train to do that for many years, right? And there are some combination of AI robotics use cases we talked about. Boston Dynamics do a lot of that. Absolutely unbelievable use cases that use robotics for, whether it's a hazardous situation and a factory floor that you don't want to send your human personnel in, you send a robot in to go and do that, or in a combat situation when there is a bomb defusal that you so go send a robot to do that. There are so many AI based robotic use cases are very pretty popular. And then in IT ops area, the predictive AI, as I call it, as opposed to the generative AI, which is the craze now. There are so many good use cases. Things like finding patterns within that. Doing AI ops use cases, doing predictions of your demand or capacity planning, and finding out your root cause. And I wrote a report on bunch of those things that we talked about, or even incident management for that matter, when incidents were to happen. So there are so many good AI use cases, AI ops, observability, and ML ops, and ML systems, the machine learning system. There are so many, even conversational AI for that matter. I mean, remember the years before when the computers used to talk to you in a mechanical voice, you would get bored out of it, like, this will never happen. But nowadays, people don't even know when they call, a customer service number or support number, you're not conversing with a real human, but you think it's human. You're conversing with a bot. I'm not talking about just typing online. The NLUs can talk in a human tone and language with you nowadays, and many companies have that. But then it becomes a problem of, at what point the company should disclose to you that you're not talking to a real human. you know, I mean, for one, I would be disappointed if I talk to AI the whole time, thinking it's a human. I would like a disclosure up front. Not that I wouldn't want to deal with that, but I would like a disclosure, please. Actually, California has a law. You know that, right? I mean, if you are dealing with a bot, you
Oh,
have to
really?
disclose it upfront. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
It
I
is the
did
only
not know
state.
that.
It's a state law, and Europe, EU has a law, Canada has a law, Singapore has a law. If it's the AI bot that's dealing with you, it need to be disclosed upfront legally.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think now they do that.
Yeah,
There was a
it has
time
to
when
be.
I was fooled by bots. I may
Mm.
not have been fooled by randomness, but I was definitely fooled by bots. Uh, Speaking of which, you brought up some very interesting points that there are use cases of AI that have been there from the days of AutoCAD or
Oh yeah,
electronic design automation, and
oh
now
yeah.
not just games and video games or human games, but also literally now with Gen AI, I think for the first time it's uh, more broader general purpose intelligence. What's your prediction on Gen AI? What's likely to happen over the next few years?
The point what you made just now, the last statement, that's a huge point that people are missing out on. The generative AI, the reason why it's going crazy is one obviously is because it's the such a usable form for non-techies, which never used to be possible.
Hmm.
I remember there was a commercial or movie that I saw years ago. The guy will go and tell them, "Hey, 2 plus 2 is 4, right?" Or something along those lines, something simple math that would have a predictable results. As a human, you could do it in 5 seconds, or you could use a calculator for 10 seconds to figure it out. And then this guy will sit there and program the crap out of it. Like, they'll show the keyboard and he'll bang on it for a while. And at the end of it, you'll say after an hour, it'll say, "You're right." so, so the AI systems used to be that complicated to use in the past. And OpenAI and Microsoft combination has democratized the crap out of it. That's one. In a human usable, simple, elegant format that you could converse with it in a natural way. That's win one. And win two is the point you mentioned. It's about the broader set of the scope of that AI, even though it was originally done to do text generation by copying the world's entire text and plagiarizing the whole thing, or images or videos that's available anywhere on the internet, and they were able to reproduce that. But the multi-modelness of the wide variety, it's not very accurate. I mean, if you look at ChatGPT and other things, the accuracy level is okay. It hallucinates. It doesn't have a ground truth. There are issues with that. But the fact that it knows way more than you do at any given point, that has blown everybody's mind away. I can pretty much use it as my personal assistant. I can go ask anytime about anything. All right. My kids used to have a joke about this. Actually, there is even a mug at home. Uh, at one point, they got frustrated with my wife saying things. My mom doesn't need Google. She knows everything. That is a coffee mug. But AI has become that now. It's become a better version of or equivalent of a Google because when you need information in the past, you used to go to Google and look for that information. That's how it has become. Google has become so popular. I mean, there are other reasons, but that's the reason why Google has become every part of the sentence, as they call it, right? It's a verb, noun, adverb, whatever that is, right? Google has
Hmm.
become that, and AI has now become that in a word that it took Google the search in internet in a much better form and is able to synthesize and give you the results what you're looking for, whether right or wrong. It gave you an answer that you hope is right and the broader applicability. And where do I see that going from there? I've seen companies as training specialized models or SLM, specialized language models or small language models, and then go specifically in a specific task and improve its accuracy and become a lot more accurate. Not 100% accurate yet, but it could be a lot more accurate than what it is. For example, there is this company that I was taking a briefing from and talking to multiple times. They will have AI read the radiographic or X-ray images and radiology images and see the things that the radiologist might have missed. And then the accuracy rates compared to one versus the other. The doctors and radiologists are somewhat less accurate. I don't want to tell the numbers and what they told me, but it's what they told me shocked me. If that's the case, why am I going to a doctor? They are able to find things at a certain time, but they were telling me AI systems can be 90+% accurate, which is a very high number. I mean, you still don't want AI to be making a decision for you, but if you can have your doctor or radiologist assisted by AI with a much higher accuracy, and that's where I think it's going to become on every job, that you will have an AI assistant who would help you to better yourself in a job. That's where I think the world is going.
It's so interesting. Just before this call, I was talking to a radiologist who is working on curating radiological data for oncology, for cancer, and other diseases. And the problem is not enough good data available,
Yep,
curated data available, but it's only a matter of time. It will be available. And before you know it, there'll be very good guidance systems, if you will, for medical doctors to make good judgments.
absolutely.
So now,
On that note, I also want to mention something.
yeah.
The good data, what you mentioned, is the key for AI. And one of the issues that most of the AI systems have, people don't realize you need a ton of data for AI models to be trained to become good at it. When I say ton of data, half of the data is used to train the models, and the rest of them are used to validate the models. And obviously, you can't validate the models on the data it already been trained, which means the thumb rule is either by 60-40 or 70-30, that you'll use 60% of the good data to train your models and 40% of the data to validate your models before you release it to the wild. And when you do that, your number, the data, what you have becomes a lot less and confusing for people. So what people are trying to do is to create synthetic data to avoid that gaps, to create more massive AI models. But the problem with that is that it's not a real world data, it's AI generated data. So which means AI generates itself models using its own data and predicts itself, and then you work on it. Becomes a little complicated.
And isn't it possible that when you use synthetic data, it could lead you on a completely wrong? It's like blind leading the blind.
Could it could it could. I remember the famous joke that they'll say that when there are 4 or 5 blind men in trying to feel out how an elephant looks like, and each of them will say that, hey, I know the elephant I know has this trumpet or tusk or what have you. It's based on what they see, and that's the same thing with the data. If you're able to train an AI model using a specific data set, whether it's a real world data or synthetic data that's created for the specific purpose of it, your models become very accurate. But then the model is honed on a certain thing, it'll completely miss other things. So it's a double-edged sword. It
And
could.
we are seeing a lot of use cases in the autonomous car industry.
Yeah.
Although some people believe that full self-driving cars are already here, it makes many mistakes, like misidentifying a car sitting in a garage on the third floor as something that could collide with it. What's your prediction on where autonomous cars are going? When will we get to level 4, level 5 anytime soon?
Speaking of autonomous cars, did you see my posting on LinkedIn about the fact that there was a Tesla? Somebody recorded a video and posted, the Tesla went behind a horse-drawn carriage in front of it, couldn't figure out what it is. It thought it was a bicyclist, a human walking, a big, huge truck. I posted on that. People were like
Yes.
having a ball. It's funny, but that's the reality of it. It's not just Tesla, right? Any AI system for that matter,
Yeah.
if it looks at a thing that it hasn't seen before, and I've been honing on this for a number of years, when it comes to objective decision making, that if I can decide based on what it has been taught, based on a previous patterns, it's absolutely perfect every single time. When it comes to subjective decisioning with the reasoning, the human brains beat them out every single day. If the human brains look at something that it hasn't seen before, the common sense and human brain kicks in, and we could make a cognitive decision based on, what, that's dangerous or that's not dangerous, or can I do this or can I not do that. That kind of subjective decisioning, still human brain wins. You can't ask autonomous car to make a decision saying that, okay, if you can't If you haven't identified that object before, if you don't know what it is before, make a decision based on what you think it is. It'll be a disaster. Eventually, yes, but I still think humans should be in the loop, not just on the autonomous cars, but any AI for that matter. I think humans should be the final decision-making authority. But again, I'm a minority on that. So a lot of people want to have complete autonomous. But ultimately, when I recommend to the customers, I tell them, if you can have human in the loop in the decisions, at least make sure that the decisions your AI make autonomous are low value and low risk applications. So it doesn't come back to affect you, whether it's based on your liability legal issues or potentially losses, or it doesn't matter what it is. Make sure it's low risk, low value applications versus high risk, high value applications where you have to have human subjective decision making, human brain involved.
Yeah, a lot of liability. In fact, a
Huge.
friend of mine said that why would you risk your life on an autonomous engine, even if it's 0.001%? But if it's a pacemaker, I don't mind because without the pacemaker, I'm guaranteed to die. So it's a different situation altogether.
Well, then let me ask you this question. People ask me all the time. Would you let AI pull your plug?
No,
There's your answer. It's a
because
very
there
simple
is
answer.
so much
I, I,
subjectivity there.
that's the point. That's the point. Now, see, that's the thing. When people say that I'll let you drive autonomous cars, I'll let you drive robot, cook my food, and the whole nine yards, ask them one simple question: would you let AI pull your plug? There comes the real answer, saying that it's a yes or no. If they say yes, then they are truly for autonomous everything. If they say no, you're just talking the talk. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, I wouldn't let AI pull my plug. I'll give you an example too, without naming. So I was talking to this hospital, a major hospital in the Northeast. We are talking about a multi-hundred bed hospital. All right. During the COVID time, a few years ago, they couldn't keep up with the demand. They were getting 3 to 4 times more patients than they could handle. How do you make a decision on who to admit, because you got to provide care for them, who to admit, who not to admit? And they actually developed an AI system which would make decisions based on the patient's health, the patient's survivability, and how long the patient will occupy the bed, so you can rotate the bed quickly, and or whether they can afford some combination formula they have developed to admit the patients when they come in. When there are, let's say, hypothetically speaking, there are 100 beds. When you get 600 people or 6,000 people for that 100 bed, to make the decision of which 100 you need to admit first. All right. And then it got involved with their lawyers and got involved by sued by other people saying that, hey, if, you got to do first come first serve basis, which they reverted to ultimately after many conversations and whatnot. But that's the classic example. Would you? I actually wrote a HBR article. I think we talked about this before, talking about the classic trolley problem. It's similar to that. The AI is not ready to make the autonomous decision set. I discuss about not this particular use case. I talk
Mm.
about a trolley problem and about my real life situation that happened, that would have AI made the same decision yet. So AI, given the objectivity, given the facts, it could make a factual based decision good. But when it comes to subjective decision, there's an older 70, 80 aged person who is coming in with COVID or with some medical complication. Their survivability rate is, let's say, only 20%, and
Mhm.
they're going to occupy your bed for many, many months to come. Would you admit that person? Or there is a younger, much healthier person in their 20s or maybe 30s, have no medical conditions, they are not feeling the effect, they might bounce off that, stay in the bed for 2 days and get out there, and then they come in. Who do you admit? Who needs you the most? That's a different question to ask than who would you admit.
True, true.
That's a tough condition to make when you have one bed and two people. How do you make the decision? You can't say
And,
you can take them both because there's no place. You got to take one.
and the
How do you decide?
ethical questions, there are a lot of subjective questions there.
That's
And
a classic trolley question, right? That is the
yeah,
trolley question. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
who would you kill? Who would you kill? I mean, one side of the people is going to get killed either way. How do you decide who to kill? And then the trolley problem, if you go through that, it's actually a very great psychological, emotional decision making exercise. Unbelievable. The first time when I read about it many years ago, I was like, wow, right? It's tough. AI cannot make such decisions. It'll get confused. It'll make objective decisions. Sometimes it could even make random decisions sometimes.
That's true. It could hallucinate, and you don't
Yeah,
want a
it could.
hallucinating
It could.
doctor to take a
Matter of fact,
decision.
I wrote another piece about this article. Actually, there
Uh,
were the Houston Independent Schools districts fired many teachers based on performance, what they call it, using an AI-based tool, suggesting these are the teachers we let go for performance reasons, and AI made the decision. And then they got sued in court, and then forget about the case in itself, but the judge who wrote a judgment is judgment is what attracted me, the wording to that. He said, when you're using AI, artificial intelligence, for any decision making, you got to prove beyond reasonable doubt that given the similar situation and the same data, a human would make the same exact decision every single time. If you can't prove that, your case gets tossed. That is so true, not just for that particular case. In any case, if you cannot prove your AI will make the decision a human would every single time, then yes, you may be able to win the case. Otherwise, your case will get tossed every single time.
True. And we are nowhere close to that from what I can
I
see.
don't think so. Again, now you're getting into lawyers' hands. You know how that's going to go. It becomes a legal subjective opinions as well on top of it.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
becomes a complicated issue.
Yeah. There's no case history there.
Mm,
Exactly.
mm.
So, as an analyst or as an advisor, you have to make many decisions based on partial information. Of course, AI will hallucinate, but
Mm.
humans have to make decisions based on very little knowledge. For example, predicting the future. And you have to have a point of view. How do you come up with a point of view? And what happens if you're wrong?
Oh, you didn't see that? I have an 8 ball somewhere here in my desk. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just totally kidding. Well, that's a tough part, right? So, uh, one of the things I tend to do, Shankar, is that a lot of my fellow advisors and analysts, they read other analysts' opinions and try to form an opinion based on what they think others think. And I, for one, don't think that's the right way to do. What I tend to do is that I don't form my opinions based on others' opinions. I tend to at least base my opinions or decisions based on the facts. What do you have? And if you have partial facts, that's going to be hard to make such a decision, on what you think it should be. And obviously you make decisions based on, as we discussed, based on what you think is right. But if 3 months or 6 months down the road, if you find out you're wrong, you should be ready to admit and change your viewpoint. That's why we call it as not only my point of view, POV, but at the current time. My POV at the current time about a subject is this, and it is subject to change based on the new evidence or facts that come up with. And that's how it should be. You should be able to evolve as the information evolves.
And I was always scared of telling the wrong thing. So at least there is a timeline. It's a
it's
four-dimensional.
it's it's it is not only a timeline, but also I will tell you this is actually an interesting conversation, because a few weeks ago I was having a conversation with my friend, and then he made a point which I thought was very good point. Given the same data set, circumstances, your decision making capability and your decisions when you're in your 20s and 30s would be probably different when you're in your 50s, 60s, or 70s. As you get older, your decision might change as well. So it depends on how much of knowledge or wisdom you have in you, also changes your decisions. It's not
That's
just
true.
timeline. Your age and
That's true.
experience matters too. So that's the
Yeah.
fifth dimension you want to add?
Well, it's always exciting talking to you and reading your reports. Please share several
Thank
of
you, man.
them because I think they're very relevant in today's, in these days. There's so much confusion going on in the market. Speaking of which, when new people come into their careers, I see a lot of them are lost, even from the best colleges in the world. They don't exactly know where to go, what to do. What do you tell people like that?
Well, so before I answer that, I always ask people like that as well. What do you do? And there was this one guy who told me an answer that blew me away. He said, I make shit up until I pretend until I make it. So that blew me away. I'm like, no, 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 that's not the right way to do it. But one of the things I advise people is that not just me, but you know, follow others that you think are experts in their field, and then listen to them. But make sure that you don't listen to a single point of view just from one person. You gotta in an argumentative style, you gotta listen to both sides of the view. So if you are listening to one person who has a certain view, also listen to another person who has a different view. I'm not talking about a political views. I'm talking about a generalist view of why one is good versus another viewpoint is good. So I always tend to listen to, one of the things I do is that when I go for my morning or evening walks, I have this bunch of list of podcasts that I listen to, almost like a point to counterpoint argument, saying that certain people talk about certain things and why that is true or is valid versus another viewpoint saying that why I think that's wrong. So by listening to these different views, it kind of kicks up your cognitive ability to analyze things in a different way, saying that, okay, what do you think is better? Which argument is better? Okay, is Social Security good or Social Security bad? And if you're listening to the viewpoint, I'm not saying good or bad. By listening to different viewpoints, you could come up to your own conclusion, saying that based on what you think is right, without having your political views, that you could make a decision based on that. You know what? In my view, based on the arguments, I think this is better.
Yeah,
It's complicated.
yeah. So, given all the stuff that you worked in, you worked as an engineer in the electronic space, programmable logic, software. Now you've been an analyst for a while. You've been an advisor to companies. Which part of the journey did you enjoy the most?
Oh God. I was hoping you wouldn't ask that question. Um, I don't know how to answer that because, to be honest with you, at every single moment, if I'm doing something for the longest time and after a while I get bored out of it, right? And then there is a new challenge, opportunity that challenges me. So I start doing some things that I want to do it, right? And I've been doing this particular one, the advisor, consultant, analyst, thought leader role, combinational role for a while. And I'm quite enjoying it. I'm not bored out of it yet. So maybe if I get bored out of this, maybe retirement is the next option, I guess. So, but for now, I'm having a loads of fun. And, it's not just about what you think, it's about what others think. And if you're able to counter argue your viewpoint against that, that's a fascinating, interesting view. So that's why I put out reports about my point of views, and there are people who agree, there are people who don't agree, you know.
I thought next time you'll be an analyst for the Patriots and for all the games that are going on.
Possibly. I mean, right now they're not doing so good to analyze anything. I mean, we had a good 20 plus years when my man Tom Brady was here, but you know
Interestingly, I met somebody who swore that your name, you added AI at the end of it. It was Andy Thor and you became Andy Thurai just to
yeah,
be AI compliant.
Thor become Thurai now. No, it's that's my legal name. I can brew it my way back when, all the way up to my long form birth certificate has that name in it. So no, it's my original name. I just happen to be so lucky, I believe, that I had
Yeah,
my
you
name.
can
So
actually have your own .ai website now, huh? So
I could, but what's the point of it? The AI website doesn't prove anything. I am who I am. People
and
know
it
who I
could be
am.
another passing phenomenon for all you
That's
know.
true.
Well,
You know,
to everybody listening, it's a joy to talk to different people, get different views. And as our friend here, Andy, is saying, Don't stick with just one point of view. That's what we are doing here. And nobody has a crystal ball that can be infallible. So we want to know more. We want to know how you're seeing it from your vantage point. Where do you see the future coming? Please come forward and talk about it. And Andy, it's a joy to read. I've been an ardent follower of you since the time I discovered you when I was an analyst in sourcing at Intel more than a year and a half ago. And thank you for all that you share. And please be bold enough, as you have always been, in saying your point of view, even if it may later turn out to be not exactly correct.
I appreciate that. No, it's an absolute pleasure, and you're one of the guys I really respect a lot, and that's why when you said, "Hey, I got to come and do your podcast, video cast, and conversational video conversation," I immediately agreed to it because I always enjoy our conversations, and I appreciate you saying that you like my viewpoint and thoughts, and yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me on your our podcast.